Got that swimming pool full of Lipton and they diving in it. Catch up, my dudes. Reflex Remastered. Got too much tea in my throat, boy. God dang. Okay, so I think I've actually made a video on this before sometime 6 or 9 years ago, but it still hasn't happened yet, so I'm gonna keep on making videos on it. And I'm gonna keep on talking about it until they actually do it. That's how important it is. That's how game-changing this would actually be if MX vs. ATV went in there and legitimately made a Reflex Remastered. What I mean by that is basically the exact Reflex that you have on PC right now. I know it's not quite like the Xbox 360 version. That was actually the best version, minus the custom tracks, obviously, but as far as the actual physics, terrain deformation, the way the bike actually felt, it certainly was just better on the Xbox version of it, but I don't even know if they have access to that, to where they could even somehow like bring that to a remastered version. So just to make it simple here, all you would have to do is take the exact game that you already have. You know, Nordic has already released with their name on it, Reflex on PC, that exact game, but amp up the graphics a little bit, amp up the visuals a little bit, bring the online servers back, you know, and I ain't just talking about on PC, I'm talking about even on console, you would be releasing this, okay, so you'd be releasing this on Xbox Series X, you know, PS5, just like you would Legends, but it would have all online working servers, all of that good stuff. That's bare bones minimum, okay? But I think you could do a lot more with it that would actually make it like, holy shit, you might be able to sell more copies of this than you did MX vs. ATV Legends. And I am not kidding around, bro. Spency boy ain't playing around, bro. Okay? Listen. If you went in there and made a better graphic Reflex, but you started coming out with like actual real life bikes in the game, like Yami Hall bikes and, you know, Kawasaki, not Dokomoto Saki. Okay, you start having all of your official newer bikes in there. You start bringing in all the newer gear in there into a Reflex Remastered. Basically everything that you're doing with Legends, but just with the actual gameplay of Reflex. Do you see what I'm saying? So another big thing that you would expect in a Reflex Remastered is an updated first-person camera. What you're seeing right here in this gameplay is actually the first-person mod for the PC version of Reflex, which is still pretty damn good to this day when you compare it to all arcade moto games. Alright, so that would just be a necessity, I feel like. That would be an absolute must in a Reflex Remastered. You could do something where it's basically just about like this Reflex first-person camera mod that we've had on the PC version forever now. You know, you'd make it somewhat similar to that. You could maybe even make it a little better than that, right? But you certainly don't want to come out with the Reflex Remastered with that damn original first-person camera where it's like field of view fucking 4 or 20, okay? You certainly want to fix upon that a little bit, and I think that would make a major difference, and that's something you've done with a lot of your newer MX vs. ATV games, like even Legends. You know, that first-person camera on Legends, pretty legendary, bro. It's pretty legit, so that's just another thing that I feel like would really separate a Reflex Remastered, right? Something you can throw whips and still see where you're going, you know, that kind of a first-person camera. So, yeah, the other big thing that I would want to see, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can vouch for me on this, I would really love to see them. Obviously, they would have all of their stock tracks in a Reflex Remastered, like their regular, Stone Point, Manchester, Kingston, all their different Supercross tracks, Fort Dodge Round 2, they'd have all their national tracks like Pine Top, Sandwick, Southwick, Sandwick, Razorback, they'd have all of that. But I think what they should also have with that is an entire selection of the stock tracks, but with pre-made. Okay, the stock tracks, but with ruts in the corners and maybe some roughness going on. That would be so kick-ass, I can't even describe it, bro. So, back in the Reflex days, this was kind of before you really had, pre-made, a lot of, hardcore pre-made ruts in the corners, but it did have a really good terrain deformation system to it, so it kind of made up for it, but once you started getting to your custom track era of Reflex, that's when we really started to see that potential of having Reflex tracks with pre-made ruts. There's just no replacement for pre-made ruts. I don't care what kind of moto game you're talking about. There's just no replacement for it. Even if you have the greatest terrain deformation system, it's just not the same getting on a glass flat smooth track as it is getting on a hardcore, breaking bump, pre-made rough, 3 or 4, pre-made ruts in the corners that actually grab you. There's just nothing else like it. I don't care what kind of moto game you're talking about. You'd be talking about, MX bikes, Reflex, MX Simulator for damn sure, with how shitty that terrain deformation system is, So, I think that would be such a major element if you could go back in here and ride on these stock tracks, so you still got the vibe like the original Reflex, but then you have all of the actual pre-made, sort of quote-unquote rougher, versions of it, and the default stock versions are more like a prepped track version of it, or however you want to word it, you know what I mean? But that would be a game changer, dude. That would be amazing, dude. I would love to go in here and ride on some of these different tracks. Could you imagine a Fort Dodge Round 2 with pre-made ruts? Could you imagine a Pine Top with some pre-made ruts where instead of having to go 5th gear, 69 miles around the outside berm, you could square it up and hit some inside rut, They would kind of have to find a way to balance that in a way, obviously, but a lot of, the Reflex stock tracks, especially when you talk about, fast laps and stuff, they've kind of turned into a thing of where everybody just eases off the gas and rolls up the inside, and most of the time you're not even really hitting the outside berms at all, so it's kind of you might as well have a rut there, you might as well have something there, and then mess around with that, breaking bump roughness where it kind of makes you have to somewhat choose your lines a little bit, right? And it makes you go in some different places on the track, and you could still have the terrain deformation on top of that, but give you the option to turn it off or on. That would be another big element to it, because as of right now on Reflex, there is no option for that. But once the custom tracks had come out for the PC version, that's when we really saw the pre-made ruts in the corners, the roughness, the tracks that didn't really have as much terrain deformation. It's like some of the track makers went in there and kind of made it where their tracks just didn't deform as much. We kind of got a whole different side of the game with that. And you certainly wouldn't want to leave that out in a Reflex Remastered. So I'm just telling you right now, if you did all these things that I'm talking about, and you had a track editor in there, you had that sort of track editor support, maybe a Steam Workshop support for it, where you didn't have to rely on these third-party Reflex Central websites, Reflex Central's down again, fixing some of that shit, I'm telling you, you would build up a whole ass community around that again. You might even have more people playing it than playing your newest MX versus ATV game.